Blessings upon you today. I'm Pastor A.T. Curry. Welcome to our Cornerstone word for the week. It incorporates our weekly Bible study along with the upcoming Sunday school lesson. And I'm certainly honored and glad to share with you again on today. I'm super excited about our study. It is within the unit series dealing with how Jesus calls those who are on the margin, so to speak, those who have become marginalized by society and or their circumstances, those whom others have written off, but yet after they have an encounter with Christ, God turns the things around and uses them for great things. Such is the nature of the text today. Jesus meets this Samaritan woman, and the text can be found in the fourth gospel of St. John chapter 4, and the Bible says there, beginning with verse 3, and speaking of Jesus himself, that he left Judea and departed again into Galilee. Verse 4 says, and he must needs go through Samaria. What exactly does that mean? Because it was not a geographical necessity. We know that because many times Jews would not even travel through Samaria at all. They would go through Perea. They would go out of the way not to go through Samaria. Samaria may have been the more direct route, but because of many people's hatred for Samaritans, they would not go through Samaria. They would go out of their way. It's amazing how some people can have so much hatred in them that they will go out of their way just not to come your way. Such is the case in the culture at the time, and certainly it's the case in the culture of our time today. But thank God we have one. The Bible says he must needs come our way, and so since we know it's not a geographical necessity, we know it must be a divine necessity. And I'm glad today that while others may not want to come our way, they may not want to come to our places of Samaria, they may want to write us off, go out of their way not to come our way, we still have one. And when we simply call on his great name, he's willing to come our way. He still must needs come to our Samaria. And so Jesus goes there, and the Bible says, now there is there in Samaria Jacob's well. That's what verse 6 says. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well. Yeah. Jacob's well is there. It's known for Jacob's well being there. That's one of the things Samaria is known for. And it says Jesus is wearied and wearied with his journey. That bears special significance for us, the fact that Jesus could become weary, because it shows the human side of Christ. He's not just the Son of God, but he's also the Son of Man. And so he got weary just as you and I can get weary. Thank God we have one who knows what it's like to experience all that we go through. It's one thing to have someone try to talk with you that has not been through anything like you have to go through. But when you have someone who's been through whatever you have to go through and has already come out victoriously, you can get some good insight and good wisdom from them. Thank God we have one who has gotten weary just as you and I can get weary. And so while he's there at this well, Bible says there cometh a woman of Samaria to draw water. Yeah, Jesus says, give me to drink. The Bible says it was about the 6th hour. That means it was high noon. When the Bible says 6th hour, that means the 6th hour from dawn. So it's 6 hours from 6 a.m. So it's the heat of the day. The heat of the day. That says a number of things about this individual that Jesus meets. First of all, it says that she has a lot going against her. She's a woman. A woman in that society at that time was considered one who would not have all of the full legal rights that a man would have. And so, matter of fact, the disciples couldn't even believe that Jesus was talking to this woman in public. They thought it was inappropriate, and so they were even amazed that Jesus would speak with the woman. Not only was she a woman in a male-dominated society, but then also she had the responsibility of bearing water, being a water bearer. Water buckets were heavy. She would come to the well and take water back to her community, back into town, back into her home. This was her job. She would do that. And so not only did she have being a woman working against her, but then bearing water also signifies her socioeconomic status. And then not only that, but the Bible again says it was at the 6th hour. That's high noon. That's at the heat of the day. Now, why would she bear water at high noon? The other women would bear it in not the heat of the day, but the cool of the day. But this woman had some other issues going on in her life. And when the other women would gather together around the well, they would talk and perhaps gossip about what was going on in town. And if you know anything about this woman's background, you can imagine that a whole lot of the gossip could have easily been about her. And so rather than subject herself to that type of treatment, she would go to the well by herself. She would go in isolation. She would go in the heat of the day so she would not have to be exposed to all of the other drama. And so here she comes, and here's Jesus there. And Jesus says, sister, can a brother get some water? And the woman's taken back by it because, again, here's a Jew gentleman speaking to a Samaritan woman. And she's like, you Jews are funny. You all don't normally have anything to say to us. Many Jews thought that Samaritans were defiled because of their mixed heritage and the like. And so, again, they would not even normally go through Samaria, let alone have a conversation with one. And then for a Jewish man to have a conversation with a Samaritan woman, particularly a Jewish rabbi, one who's considered to be a rabbi, they would shun that and look down upon it. But again, Jesus goes there out of a divine necessity to have conversation and encounters with this woman. And he says, can I get some water? And the Bible says that he does this while sitting on the well. Don't skip over that part. He sat on the well. And so imagine that in your mind. Can you get that picture? Here's a well sitting on top of another well. Here's a well sitting on top of Jacob's well. Now, Jacob's well is an interesting contrast between the two wells. This well, that is Jacob's well, it's a big well. It's some 10 feet across and some 80 feet deep. And so it's a significant well. It's a large well, but yet it has a limited supply. It has a limited supply. Um, Jacob's well was filled by way of rainwater. And so rainwater at that time was known as dead water. Dead water. It wasn't river flowing water. It was dead water. And so when Jesus asked this woman for water and from this well, and she says, why are you asking me for water? How did you even come here? You don't even have anything to draw with. And Jesus tells her, in essence, listen, if you knew who you were really talking to, you would be asking me for water, and I would give you what? Living water. So you see the contrast Jesus is making with the water. He says, the well I'm sitting on, that's dead water. That's what you came for. But what you really need is living water. That's what I have to offer. And so he says in verse 10, if thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, thou wouldst have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. This woman said unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? She says, are you greater than our father Jacob? The well is named after him. He gave us the well and drank of it himself and his children, his family, his cattle, his livestock. And Jesus tells her, listen, this well I'm sitting on, whoever drinks of this will thirst again. But the water I have for them will be an ever-flowing spring of water, springing up into everlasting life. Yeah, I'll be a well of water. That's what he says in verses 13 and 14. The woman says, well, give me that water, that I don't have to come here again and be thirsty ever again. And Jesus tells her in verse 16, okay, well, go call your husband and then come back. The woman says, I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, well, you said that well. You don't have a husband because the fact is you've had 5 husbands and you are living in sin now with a man. Yeah, and she says, sir, well, you must be a prophet, verse 19. And she says, our fathers worship in this mountain, and I know you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. And Jesus tells her that people who worship truly the Father don't have to worship in mountains. They worship in spirit and in truth. Yeah. And he goes on to say that God is a spirit. They that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. That's verse 24. And the woman in verse 25 says, well, I know that the Messiah is coming, which is called the Christ. And when he is come, he will tell us all things. And Jesus tells her, well, the one you've been looking for, you're looking at. And the one you're talking about, you're talking to. I am the Christ. And after conversation continues, the disciples, the Bible says, marveled that he talked with this woman. The woman, the Bible says in verse 28, after her encounter with Jesus, this woman who had been marginalized because she was a woman, because of her socioeconomic status, even because of her race as a Samaritan. The Bible says she got so excited, in essence, that she left her water pot behind and went away into the city and says to the man, "Come see a man." Interestingly enough, that word man in verse 28 does not mean male. It comes from the Greek word anthropoia, which means beings, human beings. So she goes back to the city and tells everybody, "Come see a man," which told me all things that ever I did, is not this the Christ? Now, of course, she knew this was the Christ, but she also knew, I'm sure, after having had 5 husbands and then living in sin with a man then, how it is to get people to do certain things. And so she knew that if she went back and told the people, "This is the Christ I found," and they may not take her at her word. And so what she does is she puts them in a position where they could come and find out on their own. You know, some people have an ego and they like to get credit for everything. And so she knew how to play on a person's ego. And so she presents to them what she knew in such a way that they could come and then act like they found out on their own, or even have that feeling that they found out on their own. You know, some people like that. You can tell them the right thing to do, but they won't take it from you. So you have to let them find out on their own. That's what this woman does, and so she's obviously a smart woman. And sure enough, when she said, "Is this not the Christ? You all ought to check him out." The city goes out to him. That's what it says in verse 30. Then they went out of the city and came unto him. And then after they have an encounter with Jesus, they go back and tell everybody, "This is the Christ." And I can hear the woman saying, "Well, I could have told you that at first, but I'm glad you went just the same." And so we see how Jesus uses this one woman who had been ostracized by her culture, by society, and he has an encounter with her, and despite her being marginalized by her circumstances, he uses her for a great work to bring many people to the kingdom. And that's what God does. Despite our past, he can give us a bright future when we simply put our trust in him and let him lead us and guide us into the way that he would have us to go. That's an amazing, intriguing story. God can take those on the fringes, those whom others have counted out, those whom others don't even want to come their way. But Jesus must needs go their way. He still must needs come our way and give us what we need so that we can make a great impact in the world and be not overcome, but become overcomers. I pray you were blessed by that today. I'm super excited about our study. Next week, it's in the Gospel of St. Mark. You can read in advance St. Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 13, and then verses 18 through 20. It's dealing with Jesus overpowering Legion. Jesus overpowers Legion. Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 13, and verses 18 through 20. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I pray you've been blessed by our study. If you'd like to be a blessing to the ministry, you can give today by way of Cash App, $C-Stone Give. You can give by way of Givelify.com on your cell phone. Pull us up, Cornerstone Baptist Church, Fayetteville, Georgia. You can even sow a seed by way of U.S. mail. Check a money order right to us, Cornerstone Church, P.O. Box 2734, Peachtree City, Georgia, 30269. Again, I'm Pastor A.T. Curry. As always, it's a real joy being with you. See you next time. God bless.